Eddie Murphy will forever be remembered for the classic movie Coming to America. After all, that movie was absolutely genius, with endless quotable lines, and the catalyst that started his own trend of playing multiple roles in a lot of his future films. And even though it was genius in Coming to America and the first Nutty Professor movie, this habit of playing multiple characters didn't translate well in all of his future projects. That being said, Eddie Murphy was and is a comedic genius. By the age of 27, he had already arguably become the best stand-up comedian and comedic actor of the 80s. Murphy had already acted in a dozen films, been a regular on Saturday Night Live, won a slew of awards, and even wrote and filmed two of the best stand-up comedy shows of all time. In some ways, over the last 30 years, Eddie enjoyed too much success and made too much money. His career became governed by a higher degree of difficulty, almost like we collectively started squeezing his strike zone in 1989 and never stopped. Ask anyone under 35 what they think of Eddie, and they'll probably say it hasn't been funny for 15 years. Ask anyone from 35 to 50 what they think, and they'll say either one of the funniest ever or love that guy, wish he stopped making so many shitty movies. We don't argue about Eddie. We don't celebrate him. We don't really do anything. You're not exactly going out on a limb by praising Eddie Murphy. It's much more interesting to say he sucks or that he isn't nearly as good as he once was. But the fact remains that he is a comedic genius. It's just that as his career grew, he simply swerved the other way publicly, taking seemingly safe roles and barely interacting with the media. Films like The Golden Child and Beverly Hills Cop II were critically panned, but were still massive draws at the box office. And even after filming his 1989 hit movie Coming to America, Eddie Murphy found failure with his directorial debut, Harlem Nights. Even with his ups and downs and moments out of the spotlight, Murphy still remains relevant up to this day. This video is the second part of my Eddie Murphy retrospective, looking back at the actor's life. The first video focused on Murphy's career from the early days till the late 80s, whereas this video will focus on his career throughout the 90s. So without any further ado, Eddie Murphy throughout the roller coaster of the 90s. Even though technically the late 80s was the height of Murphy's career, his box office receipts started declining compared to his previous films. Hollywood being Hollywood and often wanting to make a quick buck out of a popular movie by making a sequel, well, in 1990 they released another 48 Hours, which was a direct sequel to Murphy's first theatrical release, 48 Hours. In 1982, Eddie Murphy had been paid $200,000 for his role in the original film. By the time of the sequel, his fee was $12 million up front, plus a percentage of the gross. This really shows how popular he was at the time. In another 48 Hours, Nolte reprises his role of San Francisco police officer Jack Cates. While trying to capture drug lord the Iceman, Jack confronts two criminals and kills one of them in self-defense. The head of the Internal Affairs wants to prosecute Jack since there was no weapon found on the victim. In order to prove his innocence, he again needs the help of Reggie Hammond, played by Murphy, who is a newly released convict. At the same time, the Iceman has hired a biker gang to kill Reggie. Knowing the real identity of the criminal, Reggie becomes Jack's last hope. Even though the film grossed more at the US box office than its predecessor, it was considered a box office disappointment simply because another 48 Hours was so costly and profits were minimized. On an interesting note, the original work print of the film was 145 minutes long, and a week before its summer theatrical release, the film was recut to make it only 95 minutes long. This created a lot of plot holes and continuity mistakes in the film, which has often been criticized by the cast and crew, and probably the biggest reason why the movie didn't do as well as it could have done. In 1992, Eddie Murphy followed this movie with Boomerang, where he plays a successful executive in Womanizer, and that same year in The Distinguished Gentleman, where he plays a conman that discovers during a job that US Congress is where the money is. Both films were okay, but the next movie that really marked me was the 1994 movie Beverly Hills Cop III. I know it wasn't a great film, but it did mark me because I was actually able to see it in the movie theater upon its original release. Even Murphy said that studios had been asking him since 1989 to make a sequel, and he stated that there's no reason to do it. I don't need the money, it's not going to break any new ground. How often can you have Axel Foley talk fast and get into a place he doesn't belong? But these mother effers are developing scripts for it. They're in pre-production. The only reason to do a Cop 3 is to beat the bank. Paramount ain't gonna write me no check as big as I want to do something like that. In fact, if I do a Cop 3, you can safely say, ooh, he must have got a lot of money. Well, I guess he got that check, because, well, he did do that movie. As for the film, it follows Axel Foley, who is investigating the murder of his boss. This leads him to a California amusement park called Wonder World. Returning to Beverly Hills once more, Foley reunites with Detective Billy Rosewood to solve the case. Along with Billy's new partner, John Flint, they discover that the security force of Wonder World is actually part of a counterfeit money operation headed by park manager Orrin Sanderson. Even though I did enjoy the movie as a young teenager, Beverly Hills Cop 3 was considered by critics and Murphy himself as the weakest film in the trilogy. In 1995, Eddie Murphy released A Vampire in Brooklyn, which was directed by Wes Craven. Even though this movie failed to meet the studio's expectations at the box office, in more recent years it has resurfaced and since been reappraised as a cult classic, especially for Murphy and Bassett's chemistry, the humor, the musical score, and Wes Craven's direction. According to Charlie Murphy, Eddie's brother, the movie was originally going to be a straight horror film with no laughs, but Wes Craven brought a different focus to it, saying that Wes felt that to get the audience to care about the character in the film, they would at least have to identify with the type of person Murphy was portraying. The movie tells the story of Rita, who is a detective. In the wake of her mother's death in a mental institution, she is assigned to a baffling serial murder case. After examining the crime scene, a corpse-filled ship found adrift, Rita meets Maximilian, played by Eddie Murphy, a smooth-talking Caribbean playboy determined to romance her. When Rita begins suffering from crippling hallucinations, she calls upon Dr. Zico, an oculist who suspects a vampire is on the loose. In 1996, the movie The Nutty Professor was released, which is a very loose remake of the 1963 film of the same name, which starred Jerry Lewis, which itself was a parody of Robert Louis Stevenson's 1886 novella The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The film was made with the help of Jerry Lewis. He was an executive producer for both this film and the 2000 sequel to Clumps. In 2009, he expressed his regrets for allowing this remake, saying, "I have such respect for Eddie, but I should not have done it. What I did was perfect the first time around, and all you're going to do is diminish that perfection by letting someone else do it." Either way, even though Jerry Lewis wasn't a fan of the remakes, Eddie's version of The Nutty Professor was amazing, and this film received positive reviews, with critics particularly praising the makeup and Murphy's performance. This movie follows University professor Sherman Klump, played by Eddie Murphy, who is a brainy and kind-hearted man who is morbidly obese. As a research scientist, academic and lecturer, Klump develops a miraculous but experimental weight loss pharmaceutical in the hopes to win the affection of the girl of his dreams. And to do that, he tests it upon himself. Though he instantly loses 250 pounds, the side effects include a second personality, an obnoxiously self-assertive braggart who calls himself Buddy Love. Buddy proves to be more popular than Sherman, but his arrogance and bad behavior quickly spiral out of control. Murphy plays a total of 7 characters in the film, including Sherman and most of Sherman's family. In 1997, Murphy did do a movie called Metro, where he plays a hostage negotiator who teams up with a sharpshooter to bring down a dangerous jewel thief. Which again seems like a return to his roots, where he plays this kind of guy who can easily walk unarmed into the bank where the robber is holding a gun to a hostage head and gets away simply by talking. Well, after all, Murphy has always been a good talker, and he has fun with some of his dialogue. Metro is pretty much your typical formula action picture, but with the success of The Nutty Professor in 1996, most of his subsequent films became extremely family-friendly. This was a pretty big change from the usually foul-mouthed comedy acts, but as Murphy often says, if they pay him the big bucks, it's hard to say no. This led him to voicing the character of Mushu in Mulan, who is a scrawny reddish-orange Chinese dragon with blue horns and a cheeky, chappy personality. In 1998, the movie Dr. Dolittle came out and is a 1998 American fantasy comedy based on the children's story of the same name by Hugh Lofting, but used no material from any of the novels. This film's main connection is the name and a doctor who can speak to animals. In this retelling of the story, Dr. John Dolittle, played by Eddie Murphy, gets into a fender bender which reawakens his childhood ability to converse with animals. Unfortunately, the gift turns out to be a mixed blessing when the good doctor finds himself besieged by boozing monkeys, injured owls, and depressed lions who need his special assistance. This movie was extremely successful, grossing over $294 million worldwide. That same year, Eddie Murphy acted in Holy Man, and the subsequent year in a movie buddy comedy drama starring himself and Martin Lawrence called Life. Both of these movies were disasters at the box office and don't really offer much, proving in some way how even a charismatic guy like Murphy can shine if given the right material, but put in a half-digested formula, even genius can sink as any mortal human would. In 1999, Eddie Murphy acted in another one of my favorite movies of his called Bowfinger, which is a satirical comedy. Upon watching this film, people easily view it as an out there, over-the-top spoof about Hollywood films, celebrities, and even the Church of Scientology. But in reality, it's really a sweet story about a group of outsiders with impossible dreams. This movie follows the story of Bobby Bowfinger, who is an aspiring filmmaker on the verge of bankruptcy and desperate for his big break. Rallying a ragtag team that includes a starry-eyed ingenue, a has-been diva, and a film studio gopher, he sets out to shoot a blockbuster featuring the biggest star in Hollywood, Kit Ramsey, played by Eddie Murphy, who is acting in the film without actually knowing that he is in the picture. The plan goes well at first, with Ramsey, who is a member of an organization called Mindhead, who swallows the movie's alien invasion premise and believes he is genuinely being stalked by aliens, resulting in an exceptionally genuine and intense performance. However, the strain on his already precarious mental state leads him to go into hiding in order to maintain his sanity, stalling the film's production. This movie did very well in America, but not as well overseas, which makes sense since a lot of the humor was Anglophone, and personally for myself living in Los Angeles, this humor is really catered to locals who recognize the characters, locations, and in some ways the fictional yet very close to real life parodied situations. This actually concludes my second video looking back at Eddie Murphy. As you can see, Murphy is a king at comedy, but his genius can only be portrayed with the right script. Also, the pressure of having to absolutely be funny and bring in box office draws may have hindered some of his potential projects simply because he wanted to please too wide of an audience. With that being said, in the third and last video about Eddie Murphy, I will look at the genius comedian's career from the 2000s until current times. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Either way, good movie or bad movie, he'll always be one of my most revered actors and comedians in Hollywood. He's a living legend for many to inspire, and I cannot wait to see his future projects. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.